Well, hello there, folks. I've got the book open to chapter number 4. Your reading assignment, there's chapter 4, tissues, and I thought I'd give you a little kind of an intro and help you with your reading assignment perhaps. And in that connection, I ask you to have Unit 5 ready. You say, wow, Unit 5 is awfully short. Yeah, it is short. It's about this chapter, chapter 4, but just ask a couple questions. He says, is that all we got to know about chapter 4? No, we're going to keep coming back to chapter 4 as we learn about different parts of the plant and run into new types of tissue. But first of all, what's a tissue? Well, tissue is this. Many cells of the same general kind performing a common function. And so we people have tissues. We have epidermal tissue, we got skeletal tissue, we've got nerve tissue, we got connective tissue, we got blood tissue, and so forth. So what's a tissue? Many cells of the same general kind performing a common function. Take this epidermal tissue, for example. Not every single cell is identical in our epidermis, but they're of the same general kind, and they're performing a common function. What is that? I think it's to keep what's out, and keep what's in, right? And so that's a tissue. Plants have tissues as well. And aside from epidermal tissue, it has the same name. All the other names are new, strange, and different. So let's take a quick plunge into chapter 4. And we've already kind of gotten started. We learned about meristems. What is that? A region of active cell division? Yes, indeedy. And then we learned about primary growth. What's that? That's growth that makes a stem or a shoot or a root longer, and primary growth. And we learned about an apical meristem, because what's that all about? Well, when a baby's developing or a human being's growing, mitosis occurs throughout, just throughout, top to bottom, inside and out. When a plant's getting longer and the root's going down, it doesn't happen all over. Mitosis does not. It happens in a very specific place called the apical meristem, which is where? Right at the very ends of the shoots or stems and at the very ends of the roots. That's the only place the stems or roots are increasing in length, at the very end. So that's called the apical meristem. It's apex. Apex means the very end, the end. So apical meristems is where primary growth takes place. So you can read about that. We're going to get into these terms down here in a little bit later unit. And up here we have lateral meristems. What's that? Well, that's growth that produces secondary growth, for one thing. Secondary growth, that's growth that makes the stem bigger around. Increase in girth. And so lateral meristems are kind of like apical meristems. It's not throughout the stem. It's only at the very almost at the very outside of the stem is where the lateral meristem is. And in the lateral meristem, when those cells divide, it produces secondary growth, makes the stem or root bigger around. Now, not all plants have a lateral meristem. Only the woody plants do. Only the woody plants. All plants have a apical meristem, but only woody plants have a lateral meristem. What do you call a plant if it's not woody? I would call it herbaceous. Herbaceous. We'll be writing that on the board. But I'm going to be talking to you about two types of lateral meristem, not this third, vascular cambium and cork cambium. Vascular cambium is a lateral meristem that adds more pipes, more water conducting, food conducting cells. And that's what vascular cambium does. Cork cambium makes bark. Cork cambium makes bark. So we'll talk about that. Two different lateral meristems. And again, lateral meristems, the only kind of plants that have lateral meristems are what? Woody plants. Now we're going to learn about some specific types of tissues. Tissues produced by meristems. Simple tissues. Now there's a question here on your Unit 5. What is the most abundant tissue in plants? Here's the name right down here at the lower right of page 55. And that is a strange, new, and different name that I'm sure you've never heard before. It is parenchyma. Now, I try to get fancy with that, but it's parenchyma, not parenchyma. Parenchyma tissue. Parenchyma. Parenchyma tissue. That is the most abundant tissue in plants. It's found in roots, it's found in stems, it's found in leaves, found throughout the plant. Parenchyma tissue. And there's some questions here. Describe the cell walls of this tissue. Well, one form it takes is shown in the top left of the next page, page 56, and that's the picture. You can see it better if you look in your own book. Well, what's the question again? Cell walls. Well, you have nothing to compare it with, but those cell walls are very thin. So parenchyma tissue has thin cell walls. And describe the general shape of the cells of this tissue. Well, they're thin cell walls. They're pushed together. They kind of look like soap bubbles. It has a soap bubbly look. And so we have thin cell walls and generally a soap bubbly type look in parenchyma tissue. And the very last question in your Unit 5 study guide is, what is this tissue called when it has chloroplast? Well, we go a little farther down on page 56. There it is right there. It's called chlorenchyma. Parenchyma, chlorenchyma. The most abundant tissue in plants, and chlorenchyma when it has chloroplast. There you go. What else we got? Well, we're going to talk about a couple tissues called cholenchyma and sclerenchyma. You can read about those, see what those are about. Those basically provide strength and flexibility to plant stems and so forth. Cholenchyma, sclerenchyma, and then more complex tissues. More complex tissues. Over here on page 58, you learn about xylem. We're going to learn quite a bit about xylem. What is xylem? Xylem is tissue that forms pipes, and xylem tissue conducts water up roots and stems and into leaves. And so roots have xylem tissue, stems have xylem tissue, leaves have xylem tissue. It's water conducting tissue, basically up. Xylem. The movement of the water is up. As opposed to phloem tissue, it's also a vascular tissue, pipes, but the flow is down. What does phloem carry? Food. Food, phloem, food. Where's the food produced in plants? In the green part, usually the leaves, up high. Let me get my hand where you can see it, up high. And so that phloem has to get on. The phloem carries the food, the product of photosynthesis, sugar, a type of sugar, and carries it on down to the non-photosynthetic parts of the plant. So the roots, for example, don't starve to death. Phloem carries food from the leaves, generally, on down. So xylem, the flow is up. Phloem, the flow is downward. Xylem, water up. Phloem, food down. What else we got here? We got a lot of pretty pictures you can look at, and that's about it. I'm not going to really cover these last two little deals here, but there's some things on the last page we might look at. One thing you might look at is the pictures and see if you can think of, gee, what kind of microscope took these pictures? Here's a couple pictures produced by what? Electron microscope maybe? What? Scanning or transmission? Three-dimensional, not flat. Scanning electron microscope. What about this one down here? We're going to talk about that thing called a lentocell when we get to stems, but it's a flat image, it's colorful, and it could have been computer enhanced, but the magnification is only 250, and so what kind of microscope took this one? Yeah, compound light microscope and so forth. So there's your overview of Chapter 4, and also we went through the answers on Study Guide for Unit 5. So what I'd like you to do is look at this video, which I guess you are, and then if you haven't already, let's read that Chapter 4 and in the textbook, and then I would like you to contact me, send me an email after you've watched this video. All right, that's it for this one. Bye-bye.